In terms of the agreement, the overall agreement itself, our Chinese counterparts have come with very aggressive asks. We will see if we can get there. At present, we are not willing to sacrifice our national security for a social media app.
Again, the Secretary is referring to our TikTok discussions. We have had general discussions as well about the trade situation. We have huge imbalances, persistent, massive trade imbalance with China. We've been consistent, over many weeks and months about this issue. It's always helpful to talk to our colleagues. I don't think we found a path forward on that.
That was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer detailing China trade talks in Madrid this week and the difficulties they saw over the TikTok deal. The president, of course, has been urging corporate America to move their supply chains to America so that the U.S. can be less reliant on communist China. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer joins me right now. Ambassador, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. We so appreciate your time and your work on all of this. Can you walk us through a bit about what was accomplished in this, was it the fourth meeting?
Yes, good to see you, Maria. Happy to talk to you about what happened at the meeting with the Chinese. We were in Madrid, Spain this time. And this meeting was really focused on TikTok. You'll know, of course, that the TikTok saga has gone on for a long time. Toward the end of his first term, President Trump set about to solve it. Over the course of the Biden administration, they grappled with this issue but could not solve it. But as of yesterday, we believe that President Trump has, in fact, resolved this issue, balancing the national security needs of the United States with the economic realities of having TikTok operating in the United States of America. And so the discussions were really focused on that. How do we get to a place where Chinese concerns are addressed and American national security priorities are taken care of? And that's what we achieved.
And of course, national security has been of the utmost importance for President Trump. He looks at all of these deals through a national security lens. So how can you balance this, continue to have this app in America, but not affect national security? Will the data of this app, the user's data, be going back to China?
It can't, right? So Congress, as you know, put forward a law and passed a law requiring that the national security concerns around TikTok be resolved, and if not, that TikTok goes dark in the United States of America. And of course, the Trump administration and the president himself were perfectly willing to let that happen, absent some kind of a deal that would resolve national security concerns, including the user data issue, which is of key importance. There is a deal out there between the private parties who are making the transaction, and it does account for this specific issue on U.S. user data, so it doesn't go back to Beijing.
And I know President Trump did that deal in terms of the U.S. owner a long time ago. He told me so in an interview earlier this year. Watch this.
Well, I'm trying to extend the pause. I don't think I'll need to because I could. There's no big deal. It's like TikTok. I'm extending that, but no big deal. We have a buyer for TikTok, by the way. I think I'll need probably China approval. And I think President Xi will probably do it.
Who's the buyer?
I'll tell you in about 2 weeks.
A big technology company there.
Very, very wealthy people. It's a group of very wealthy people.
So, Jamieson, it was long expected that it would be Oracle. Is Oracle going to acquire the U.S. Assets of TikTok?
Well, I won't comment on the U.S. buyers. Just to give some background on this, there's a commercial deal between the commercial parties here, and our discussions in Madrid were really about how to achieve Chinese government approval of the commercial deal. So we'll let those parties disclose their shares and their identities at the right time.
Are there other issues that hit national security away from China having that data?
So, listen, I think a lot of people in America have had concerns about TikTok for a long time.
Sure.
It's bipartisan. As I said, in the first Trump administration, we wrestled with this. The Biden people did as well. I think a lot of it has to do with that user data. So I think we have that issue that we believe the commercial terms will address this. There are discussions about the intellectual property and the algorithm, which again are addressed in the commercial terms. And so we're comfortable that we're in a position where the national security concerns of the United States are in fact addressed.
All right, so I know this framework is still being talked about. You did it just before the deadline to divest the U.S. operations or face a ban. But I want to get your take on the broader trade issues. Does the TikTok situation fall in the middle of that? Because we're also waiting to see what happens with the international economic emergency and where that stands. I know you and the Treasury Secretary have said that you think the president will win this, right?
So yes, we do. We feel pretty strongly about the strength of the legal case. With respect to the TikTok matter, for months, the Vice President's office has been working very closely on this, and they've brought us to this point where we are working with the commercial parties, ensuring that national security is protected. The reason why it started to come into the trade lane a little bit is because the Chinese suggested that they were interested in trading something off with respect to trade or other things in return for their approval. That really, at the end of the day, is not what happened. As you've heard the Secretary discuss, they made a lot of aggressive asks on the trade front in connection with TikTok. Ultimately, we just focused it on the TikTok transaction. We focused it on the investment climate in the United States for Chinese companies. And those are the appropriate kind of things to discuss with the Chinese when you're talking about the TikTok investment. So we were able to keep all those other trade tariff issues really to the side.
Well, look, even if the IEEPA tariff trial goes against the president, you all have backups, right? I mean, I know that the president issued that executive order last Friday modifying the scope of reciprocal tariffs and establishing procedures for implementing trade and security agreements. I'm wondering what the backup is, because you could also go to, Section 338, should the Supreme Court agree with the lower courts. You've got other implementation backup plans. Have those been discussed?
Well, Maria, if you look back to the first day of this administration, the president released an America First trade policy, and in that document, he went through a number of different measures, concerns, and different actions he could take. We believe that the IEEPA action and the reciprocal tariff action and the related sectoral tariffs under Section 232, we believe these are the best way to go. These are the ideal tools that really serve the needs of the country best in this emergency situation. If for some reason those don't go forward, we'll continue executing the president's trade policy. The thing for everyone to know is that tariffs are going to be part of the policy landscape. They are now, they will be going forward, and we feel very strongly that we'll be successful at the Supreme Court.
That's what I figured, because the Section 338 proclamation could come over and carry the entire IEEPA tariff structure seamlessly, right? I mean, then you've also got the issue of Sections 301 and 232 when looking at steel, et cetera. So would you expect that the revenue that we've been seeing from tariffs is not going to be interrupted regardless of this?
Again, Maria, I think that we're very focused on winning the case right now. Obviously, we talk all the time about the best way to execute the president's trade policies. He has a lot of levers that have been delegated to him by Congress, and we'll do whatever is necessary. The IEEPA action, for sure, is the best way to do this. It gives the president the flexibility he needs. We're in an emergency situation. He's using that statute exactly how it's supposed to be used. He's modifying it as appropriate as we come to terms with countries to improve our trade balance with them. He is doing exactly what the law requires him to do with this.
What would a good trade deal with China look like, Ambassador? What do you want to hear when the president speaks to Xi Jinping on Friday?
I think that a good trade deal with China, it looks like something where trade is more balanced and where we're trading in goods that are, frankly, non-sensitive. Our economic relationship with China is so important. It's very large. We want to be able to trade with China, but we want to do it in a way that's healthy and good for our economy. And so that means that we need to have balance with them. We can't have all these huge amounts of imports flooding our country, being dumped onto our market, undermining our workers, undermining our manufacturers. We need to be able to export to them. We make a lot of agricultural goods, manufactured goods that should be very competitive in their markets. They keep them out unfairly, And so if we're going to have a good trade deal with China, it has to address those things. We have to have a more balanced relationship. They have to provide market access. And for many years, that's not what the Chinese have wanted. So it's not an easy thing to achieve, but those are the types of principles that we're looking for in any deal with the Chinese.
Of course, understood. And particularly as it relates to those magnets and rare earth minerals, do you have a confidence, Ambassador, that in fact the flow of those magnets and minerals is going to continue? And how do you walk this balance of sending China the chips that we make that they need, but not giving up on national security by giving them our best chips that we need for the military?
We agree 100%, Maria, with that approach. In the Trump administration, with respect to the rare earths, frankly, most of our discussions over the past 4 or 5 months have been about securing that flow. And if you look at the Chinese export figures, you'll see that their exports of rare earths have bounced back up significantly since we've started these talks and created mechanisms and pathways to secure those types of magnets for American producers. And then on the other hand, we've maintained our export controls where appropriate. Everything is going to be a dance with the Chinese. What do we control? What do we send? What do we buy? What do we not? And we're in the process right now, and I think we will be over the next several months of figuring out where those lines are.
Understood. Ambassador, it's great to have you this morning. We so appreciate your leadership on all of this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Jamieson Greer at the White House. We'll be right back.